Tonight, we bring you a powerful story that's more than just headlines. It's a defining moment in modern America. Karoline Leavitt, the youngest White House press secretary, goes head-to-head with comedian Trevor Noah in a confrontation that left the nation stunned. This isn't about left or right, it's about courage, truth, and how you carry yourself when the pressure hits. Settle in, this is a story you'll want to hear to the end. In a time when America feels more like two countries sharing the same borders, truth itself has become contested ground. The nation no longer argues over facts, but over whose version of them deserves the microphone. From newsrooms to neighborhood barbershops, from small-town diners to Capitol Hill, the temperature has risen beyond debate. It's now a struggle for narrative supremacy. Political satire no longer entertains, it shapes opinions. Press briefings aren't updates, they're battles. And somewhere along the way, the American Forum, a place once reserved for civil discourse, has become a cultural coliseum where every word can draw blood. Into this storm walks the Jefferson Forum, an old courthouse in Philadelphia, restored not with marble and glass, but with purpose. Once a cradle of revolutionary ideals, tonight it stands ready to host a confrontation not between left and right, but between two competing visions of what truth even is. One is represented by Karoline Leavitt, the youngest White House press secretary in U.S. history, a sharp, unyielding voice for an administration many revere and others revile. The other, Trevor Noah, a comedian whose stage has become a platform for political critique, a man whose laughter cuts as sharply as any headline. The public is divided before the first question is even asked. Some see Karoline as a courageous truth-teller confronting a corrupted media elite. Others see Trevor as a principled satirist, using humor to expose hypocrisy. And everyone watching knows, this won't be a friendly exchange, this will be a reckoning. For the men who remember Walter Cronkite's calm, Reagan's resolve, and the days when truth had one name, this is the moment to see whether it still does. Because when truth becomes entertainment, the only question left is, who's really writing the script? The evening air outside the Jefferson Forum is thick with anticipation, the kind that settles not just over a venue, but over a nation watching itself in the mirror. The courthouse-turned-studio sits in the heart of Philadelphia like a stone sentinel, its columns draped in soft uplighting, its interior echoing with the hushed murmurs of citizens who didn't come for spectacle, but for a confrontation long overdue. Inside, the audience is composed mostly of seasoned Americans, men with silver at their temples, veterans in pressed caps, retirees in Sunday coats. These are the men who built things, who remember what the country once felt like before everything became a shouting match. They've gathered not for entertainment, but for answers. And they know tonight's answers won't come easy. At precisely 7:02 p.m., Karoline Leavitt steps onto the marble steps at the rear of the building. She moves with the quiet confidence of someone who's already rehearsed the weight of the moment. No entourage, no theatrics, just a manila folder under one arm and a press aide keeping a respectful distance. Her heels echo in the hallway, sharp and steady, as if marking time. She nods once to a staffer and enters the green room without a word. 15 minutes later, Trevor Noah arrives. The crowd outside, mostly younger on this side of the rope, cheers and snaps photos. He flashes a smile, the same one that made him a household name on late night, and waves with easy charisma. His team follows him closely, armed with notes, energy drinks, and practiced calm. But as he enters the venue, his smile falters just slightly. Not because he's nervous, but because this isn't his stage. This isn't stand-up. This is a battlefield and he knows it. Backstage, the contrast is palpable. Karoline sits alone, eyes on the monitor, lips barely moving as she rehearses. Trevor cracks a quiet joke to his producer but glances at the empty chair across from his on stage. They haven't seen each other yet, but they will soon. And in the silence between their arrivals, the air inside the Jefferson Forum grows heavier, not with dread, but with history. The kind you feel just before something irreversible takes place. At exactly 8:00 p.m., the lights in the Jefferson Forum dim, and a single spotlight illuminates the center of the stage. From the wings steps Elliot Granger, the evening's moderator. With his navy suit, wire-rimmed glasses, and the gravitas of a man who once narrated presidential inaugurations, he commands immediate silence. A Pulitzer-winning journalist turned public affairs anchor, Granger isn't here for showmanship. He's here to restore something older than applause: respect for the truth. He lets the room breathe before speaking. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Jefferson Forum. This isn't satire. It isn't spin. It's not even television as usual. Tonight we return to the tradition that built this country, where opposing voices clash, not to entertain, but to uncover what is true. He gestures toward the stage setup. 2 chairs, 2 mics, nothing more. Then, with solemn clarity, he delivers the rules. Each speaker will have uninterrupted time. Questions must be answered directly. No name-calling, no theatrics. Any evidence shown, especially video, must be verified. Above all, respect the process, or the forum ends. The audience nods in approval, men and women who remember when political discourse wasn't about ratings but responsibility. Granger finishes with a final reminder. This stage does not reward applause, it honors truth. Let's begin. From opposite sides of the stage, Karoline Leavitt and Trevor Noah step into the light. The contrast is striking. Karoline sits upright, hands folded over a manila folder. Trevor leans back slightly, composed but alert. Granger cues Trevor first. "Mr. Noah, you may begin." Trevor rises smoothly, adjusting the microphone with the comfort of a man used to millions of eyes. "I never thought telling jokes about politics would land me in something that feels like a courtroom," he says with a soft chuckle, "but here we are." He speaks of satire not as slander, but as a mirror, of how humor, particularly as an immigrant, helped him understand the contradictions of America. "We joke because we care," he says, "because it helps people breathe through the noise." Then he turns to Karoline, tone respectful but pointed. "I don't hate anyone, I question everyone, and if questioning power is dangerous, maybe the real threat isn't the laughter, it's the silence." Some in the audience nod, others stay still. Rated turns. "Ms. Leavitt, your opening." Karoline rises deliberately, her voice is calm, precise, each word like the tap of a gavel. "I didn't come here to argue with a comedian. I came because I believe the American people deserve more than laughter while their country burns." She speaks of how satire has drifted from insight to manipulation, how late-night comedy has, in her view, become a delivery system for political messaging. When the punchline always lands on one side of the aisle, it's no longer humor, it's propaganda with a laugh track. She turns to Trevor. "You're not just telling jokes, you're shaping public opinion, and the American people have a right to know. Who's funding that opinion?" Her words land like a weight on the room. The contrast couldn't be clearer. Trevor offered warmth and reflection. Karoline brought precision and challenge. 2 philosophies, 2 battlegrounds, and 1 stage. Granger steps forward. "You've both had your say. Now, let's find out what happens when truth and performance share the same light." The night and the reckoning begins. The auditorium stills as Elliot Granger lifts his chin, signaling the transition from opening statements to confrontation. "Anxiety. Leave," he begins. "You've raised concerns about the political role of satire. What exactly are you challenging Mr. Noah on tonight?" Karoline Leavitt leans forward, her voice composed, unwavering. "I'm not questioning his right to speak. I'm questioning the purpose behind what he says, and the machine backing him." He turns to Trevor, calm but firm. "You mock President Trump. You mock the millions who supported him, not as a citizen speaking truth to power, but as a performer aligned with an agenda. So I ask, are you a comedian or a strategist in disguise?" A current of tension passes through the room. Trevor folds his hands, a thin smile playing on his lips. "Karoline," he replies, "I tell jokes about power. That's what satire is, whether it's Trump, Biden, or the janitor outside the Oval Office. If someone makes a mess, I call it out. And Americans, real Americans, can handle being questioned. That's democracy." Leavitt doesn't blink. Unless the jokes are scripted, unless they're written to undermine one man, one party, one message. Not rooted in balance, rooted in polling. Granger raises an eyebrow. Are you suggesting, Ms. Leavitt, that Mr. Noah's satire was coordinated? Karoline places a steady hand on the folder in front of her. I'm not suggesting, I'm preparing to prove it. The audience leans in, some stir uncomfortably. A veteran crosses his arms. A student near the back unlocks his phone. Trevor's tone sharpens. Let's not pretend your side doesn't use messaging strategies. Your press briefings aren't spontaneous sermons. Everyone plays the game, Karoline. I just do it with a mic. Karoline nods, slowly. But I don't pretend it's comedy. I don't hide who I stand with. The difference is, when I speak, the public knows I represent the White House. When you speak, they think it's from your heart. That line lands hard. Murmurs ripple through the room before Granger raises a hand for silence. Mr. Noah, your response? Trevor exhales. I use humor to ask uncomfortable questions. That's all I've ever done. If it made people laugh, it's because it resonated. If it made the system nervous, maybe the system should ask why. Karoline leans back, voice cool. And maybe tonight, Trevor, it's your turn to answer that. Granger lets the silence speak. Let's continue. We're no longer discussing jokes, we're discussing intentions, and the nation deserves to know where those intentions lead. The atmosphere in the Jefferson Forum tightens like a vice. The initial dance of rhetoric has ended. Now comes the substance. Karoline Leavitt calmly reaches for the folder that's been resting before her like a sealed verdict. She opens it, slides a few pages onto the table, and lifts her gaze to meet Elliot Granger's. Her voice is firm, her cadence deliberate. Mr. Granger, ladies and gentlemen, and Mr. Noah, she begins, you asked about intentions. Allow me to clarify mine. I didn't come to make accusations. I came to show the country what's behind the curtain. She holds up the first document, reading from it. This is an invoice from Redline Strategies, a San Francisco-based media consultancy. 3 years ago, they received $2,500,000 0 cents from a political action nonprofit tied to several high-profile anti-Trump donors. In turn, Redline distributed funds to multiple media influencers under the label of engagement-focused satire. She turns the page and slides a printed email across the table toward Trevor. This is from your executive producer at The Daily Show, dated 6 weeks before the 2020 election. It reads, and I quote, "Let's make sure Trevor leans into the anti-Trump content. Polls show younger voters are responding, ratings are up. This is our moment." A murmur rises in the crowd. Granger leans forward, eyes narrowing. Trevor doesn't respond immediately. He slowly picks up the paper, skimming it. His smile has faded into something closer to disbelief. Whether at the document or the theater unfolding before him is unclear. Finally, he exhales and speaks, evenly but pointedly. Let me be very clear, I have never accepted payment from any political organization to say anything on The Daily Show. The show is funded by Comedy Central. I speak what I believe, no strings attached, and if someone at the production company used language like that, it wasn't directed by me. Karoline's response is immediate. She slides a second page across the table, a signed production contract. This agreement, she says, tapping the header, allocates $1,200,000 0 cents to a special media initiative titled Political Satire for Civic Engagement. The scope includes a campaign specifically focused on amplifying anti-Trump narratives across multiple platforms. Your name appears 3 times in the internal notes. The camera zooms in. The audience stirs again, half stunned, half skeptical. Trevor stiffens. His voice, when it comes, is harder now. Karoline, you're playing a dangerous game. If these documents are real, and I mean if, then I'll look into how my name ended up on them, but I won't stand here and let you turn a decade of my work into a bought and paid for hit job. Granger raises a hand. Let's remain focused. Miss Leavitt, are these documents verified? They've been reviewed by an independent media analyst and cleared for legal disclosure, she replies. And I have more emails, drafts, payment schedules, but what matters tonight isn't how deep this goes, it's that it goes there at all. She leans slightly forward, her voice quieter but colder. You told America you were making them laugh, but you were feeding them something else. And tonight, they deserve to know what. Trevor leans back slowly, his fingers drumming on the table. He's no longer smiling. Granger glances at both of them, then turns to the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, the questions tonight are no longer about comedy or politics. They are about trust and whether we've been laughing with someone or at ourselves. The Jefferson Forum falls silent, not out of boredom, but because everyone in the room feels the shift. The night is no longer about clever jabs or talking points. It's become something else entirely. A trial by spotlight. Elliot Granger senses it too, his voice softer now, almost reverent, as he asks the question everyone's waiting for. Ms. Leavitt, you've presented financial records and internal communications, but you mentioned earlier that there's something more, something definitive. Do you intend to share it now? Karoline Leavitt, her posture as composed as ever, reaches into a leather case beneath her chair. From it, she retrieves a slim USB drive and places it gently on the table like a final piece in a long strategic game. Her voice is low, but it carries through the auditorium like a bell. This is a behind-the-scenes video. It was recorded during a production meeting at The Daily Show. In it, Mr. Noah is heard saying, clearly, "We need to keep targeting Trump. That's what drives the ratings. If we stop now, we lose the audience." A collective inhale ripples through the room. Trevor Noah's expression freezes for a fraction of a second. Then slowly, deliberately, he sits forward. That video, if it exists, is edited, manipulated, or taken out of context. I've said things in jest, in the writer's room, that were never intended for public release. But if you're holding that over my head like a guillotine, Karoline, be very careful. You're not playing politics anymore. You're playing with reputations. No, Trevor, she responds, sharp as ice. I'm not threatening your reputation. I'm holding up a mirror. Granger turns to Noah. Would you like the video to be played, Mr. Noah? The room is electric with tension. Trevor glances at the crowd, some faces filled with curiosity, others already carved into judgment. He leans back, arms crossed. Play it, don't play it, it's a circus act. You want to turn this place into a media tribunal? Be my guest, but don't pretend this is about truth. It's theater, and you're just reciting from the Trump script. That's when Karoline stands. She doesn't raise her voice, she doesn't need to. The difference between theater and truth, Trevor, is that one ends when the curtain drops, the other keeps affecting people's lives. Americans believed your stage was neutral. They believed your humor was just that, humor. But when the same man is mocked 400 times, and the same party ridiculed in every segment, it stops being comedy. It becomes conditioning. The audience erupts, not in laughter, not even in applause, but in startled murmurs and shifting seats. A veteran near the back whispers, "She's not wrong." A younger viewer near the front shakes his head, muttering, "This is insane." Trevor rises now, the calm cracking at the edges of his voice. You're accusing me of brainwashing the country? Because I told jokes? Because I questioned a president who threatened democracy? Where were your questions when he tweeted conspiracy theories at 2 a.m., when he called journalists enemies of the people? Karoline doesn't back down. I wasn't writing punchlines. I was in the room answering those questions from real reporters, not comedians. Granger steps forward, hands slightly raised, not to stop them, but to remind them, this is still a debate, not a battlefield. Enough. The video will not be played until verified. But let this exchange be what it is, a confrontation between two figures who claim to speak for the people, and tonight, the people are watching. Trevor and Karoline stare at each other. No more scripts, no more grins, just two Americans who came to the same place, with very different ideas of what truth looks like. The stage, once sterile and orderly, now burns with tension that can't be walked back. And no matter who speaks next, the audience knows. Something just changed. The silence that follows feels almost sacred. Trevor Noah stands motionless for a long moment, his jaw tight, the lights casting sharp shadows across his face. The tension is no longer theatrical, it's personal, carved into the lines around his eyes. Then, without fanfare or farewell, he reaches for his microphone, carefully unclips it, and lays it on the table. The metallic click echoes louder than any speech. He looks at Elliot Granger, then at Karoline Leavitt, and finally sweeps his gaze across the audience, half expectant, half stunned. His voice, when it comes, is low, but resolute. "I won't play a role in a stage-managed attack. If I stay, it turns into a circus. If I leave, at least I leave with my dignity." And with that, he walks off the stage, not storming, not defeated, but deliberate. The sound of his footsteps against the old wood floor is strangely louder than the burst of noise that follows. Gasps, scattered applause, boos, and rising chatter. Some viewers in the back rise to their feet, others shake their heads. Phones are raised, clips are already being streamed live. Before he reaches the side curtain, Elliot Granger remains still, hands clasped, letting the moment breathe. Karoline Leavitt doesn't flinch. She simply watches him leave, her expression unreadable, somewhere between a strategist's restraint and a soldier's silence. When the noise dies down, she speaks just 5 words into her still active mic. "That wasn't comedy. That was clarity." The meaning of Trevor's exit fractures instantly across the audience. To some, it's an act of principle, walking away from what they see as a politically staged ambush. To others, it's retreat, a man unwilling to face what he's long dished out. But regardless of interpretation, the moment is undeniable. The room has changed. The tone has shifted. The country, watching from living rooms and laptops, now has something more than talking point. They have a walk-off, and they have to decide what it meant. The walk-off left a vacuum, and in television, vacuums never last long. As the echoes of Trevor Noah's final steps fade, Elliot Granger steps into the moment with the grace of a man who's weathered many storms. He turns toward the audience, his expression sober but steady. "We've just witnessed a moment that will undoubtedly ripple beyond these walls. Mr. Noah chose to leave not because he was silenced, but because he believed the process had become corrupted. Ms. Leavitt remained, not to gloat, but to complete the mission she came here for." Granger then pivots his attention to a panel of in-studio commentators, seated stage right. 3 individuals, a retired judge, a political historian, and a media ethics professor. Their microphones are unmuted as the post-event breakdown begins. The retired judge, a former Federal Circuit Court appointee, is first to speak. "What we just saw wasn't a meltdown, it was a standoff. And Trevor's walk-off? That was a calculated statement. In legal circles, we call that a withdrawal with prejudice. He didn't want to dignify the evidence, so he left before it became irrefutable." The historian nods, adjusting his glasses. This forum wasn't just a media event. It mirrored the ideological divide of the country. Karoline Leavitt framed herself as a steward of institutional truth, while Noah represented the cultural counterbalance. But when satire meets documentation, history tends to favor the side with records, not punchlines. Finally, the media ethics professor weighs in, her voice sharp but fair. "The moral high ground tonight depends on your definition of truth. Was Trevor protecting his integrity or avoiding accountability? Was Karoline shining a light or building a bonfire? Either way, this wasn't just a clash of personalities, it was a clash of platforms. Comedy, politics, journalism, they all collided here." Granger offers the final in-show word. "Ladies and gentlemen, whether you side with Leavitt or with Noah, what's clear is this. America is watching not just the facts, but how those facts are handled. Tonight wasn't about who shouted loudest. It was about who stood still the longest when the fire got hot." And with that, the panel fades to black, but the conversation has only just begun. Within minutes of Trevor Noah's quiet exit from the Jefferson Forum, the internet ignites, not in chaos, but in what can only be described as controlled ideological warfare. Hashtags trend with surgical speed. Noah walks out, Leavitt exposes truth, comedy on trial. On cable news, anchors scramble for breaking updates. Fox News opens with a chyron reading Leavitt stuns nation, media elite on the run, while CNN counters with Trevor Noah refuses to play part in political theater. The coverage is swift but sharply split, mirroring the audience at home. In living rooms across the country, particularly among older male viewers, the reactions are intense and polarized. In one Midwestern VFW hall, veterans gather around a muted flat screen, watching the replay with narrowed eyes. "He walked away when it got real," one says, sipping black coffee. "That tells you everything." But in a New York cafe, a group of retired teachers discuss the same scene, viewing Trevor's departure as a line in the sand against manufactured outrage. The Daily Show issues a brief statement on social media, defending Trevor's record and dismissing the allegations as mischaracterized and misleading. Meanwhile, conservative commentators flood the airwaves, calling Karoline Leavitt a modern-day truth hammer and praising her composure. The Wall Street Journal runs an editorial titled, "The Night Satire Met Its Reckoning," while The Atlantic pens a counterpiece, "Leavitt's Strategy, Accusation as Optic." But perhaps the most revealing fallout isn't on television, it's on YouTube. Dozens of creators from both sides upload instant breakdowns. 5 lies Trevor told, Leavitt's power play, or political theater. Noah didn't walk away, he stood up. Comments flood in, many from older men, who praise Leavitt's calm and criticize what they call comedy without accountability. In the end, the fallout isn't just about reputations. It's about what the country now believes satire can or should do. And in that battleground, truth is no longer a fact to be proven, it's a perception to be claimed. The night may have ended at the Jefferson Forum, but for the public the verdict is still being written. One upload, one opinion, one side at a time. As the dust settles on the Jefferson Forum, men across the country, especially those who've lived long enough to remember when debates were settled by facts, not feelings, sit back in quiet reflection. In barber shops, veterans' halls, living rooms lit by Fox or C-SPAN, the night is replayed not for drama but for meaning. To these men, what they saw wasn't just television, it was a test of courage, conviction, and control. Karoline Leavitt didn't raise her voice, she didn't insult, she presented, waited, and stood her ground. In a world where shouting often drowns out substance, that posture carried weight. Trevor Noah's walk-off? It wasn't dismissed entirely, some respected it. After all, walking away from conflict can be a sign of principle, if done for the right reason. But others saw a man once sharp with words, suddenly unable to answer when the room shifted from applause to accountability. He wasn't canceled, he wasn't shouted down, he was simply asked to explain. And he declined. What resonated most with men that night wasn't the paperwork or even the video tease. It was composure. It was how Karoline faced scrutiny head-on, while Trevor chose the exit. In an era saturated with noise, posturing, and media performance, the Jefferson Forum offered a rare return to stoicism under pressure. And for the generation raised on leaders who stood tall in storms, that mattered more than any hashtag. The night reminded them, it's not always who speaks loudest that commands respect, but who stays when the fire gets hot. The stage is empty now, the chairs have been cleared, the lights dimmed, and the Jefferson Forum once again stands silent, a relic of the night America stopped laughing and started questioning. But the echo of what transpired continues to ripple outward. For Karoline Leavitt, this was more than a televised confrontation, it was a declaration, a promise to pull back the curtain on what she sees as performative media dressed up as public service. In the days following the event, she returns to Washington not just as press secretary, but as a newly forged symbol for a growing faction of Americans demanding clarity, not charisma. As for Trevor Noah, his departure from the stage marks a turning point. Whether it was a principled stand or a strategic retreat is a debate that may never resolve. But one thing is certain, his silence afterward speaks almost as loudly as his comedy once did. Rumors swirl of a new special, not built on punchlines but reflections. A man once protected by laughter may now face the world with something far more vulnerable. Truth, without a script. The country, meanwhile, remains divided, but awakened. The event has triggered town hall debates, school discussions, and even congressional inquiries into media influence. But more importantly, it has reminded a weary nation that how we speak matters just as much as what we say. Elliot Granger closes the final broadcast with a phrase that lingers. History doesn't judge by who won the room, it judges by who changed it. What happens next depends not on hashtags or headlines, but on whether Americans are ready to demand less performance and more truth. The curtain has dropped, but the conversation, long overdue, has only just begun. The confrontation between Karoline Leavitt and Trevor Noah at the Jefferson Forum wasn't just a clash between politics and comedy, it was a mirror held up to the nation. In a world saturated by performance, where truth is often blurred by personality and narrative, the story reminded Americans, especially older generations, that dignity still matters. Karoline's calm resolve in the face of opposition and Trevor's walk-off under scrutiny revealed something deeper. When the moment demands clarity, silence or spin won't do. The lesson wasn't about who won, but about how we engage when stakes are high. Facts must be answered with facts, accusations must meet evidence, and conviction means little if it folds under the weight of a difficult question. For American men who've lived through decades of national trials, wars, recessions, scandals, this story echoes a familiar truth. Strength isn't about shouting louder, it's about standing still when the fire rises. As political and media lines continue to blur, the takeaway is simple yet urgent. In the age of viral noise, integrity isn't a performance, it's a choice. And America is watching to see who still has the courage to make it.